It got to the point where it was just too much to deal with, like I was going to the cardiologist and they said, well, the only option is basically pacemaker or an ablation. We can go in there and burn the nerves in your heart. I was bloated all the time. My stomach hurt. I started bleeding from back there, which is a pretty horrible thing to have. Thought I was going to pass out. I was extremely lightheaded, weak. My knees were shaking. My whole body was shaking. So I just gave up. I was like, you know what? I'm probably going to die at this point. At any moment, I could probably have a heart attack. I'm probably going to die. Screw it. All right, so this is more or less just going to be an introduction to my channel. It's a brand new channel. Just now starting this journey. I want to share what I've learned over the years. I'm a 5-year carnivore. I'm going to go over and explain how I got here, what led me to carnivore, why I continued to do this lifestyle for so long, why I've been carnivore for 5 years, and my experiences overall. My name is Jacob, and Apex Packing Tribe was founded because of my experience, what I went through with my health. And for me to describe that, it's probably best that I just start from the beginning. So growing up, I was always a skinny kid. No matter what I ate, it was very, very difficult for me to gain weight. Now, I grew up on a farm, and I was very fortunate to have that kind of lifestyle. I think that's a thing that a lot of kids these days don't get to experience. I really wish they did, because I was outside all the time. I was playing on the farm. I was getting my hands dirty, getting my feet dirty. One of my favorite pastimes, all right? It's kind of funny, but I would go out into the fields. We had like 4 farm ponds. And I would catch turtles all the time. I was always out there catching turtles. And we had these big old cow troughs, and I would fill them up with water, and I would put these turtles in there, and I would have like 20 or 30 turtles at a time. I'd catch these things, I'd keep them for a couple of days, I'd turn them loose, and just kind of repeat the process. So, I was out in the ponds, I was getting muddy, I was swimming with the cows out there, and like I'd fish and stuff like that too. Very, very much a country boy, very outdoorsy, always running around. I was like a little ball of energy at the time. But so that was my life growing up. I was very active. My diet was fantastic. My mom is an amazing cook. Everything that we ate came from the farm. We had a garden. We had like 30 or 40 head of cattle. And my mom would can food. We had a cellar, so a lot of the food got stored down there, like potatoes and things like that. So I ate 3 honest home-cooked meals every single day. Very balanced, well-balanced home-cooked meals. Veggies, greens, potatoes, and meat. So it's pretty much a definition of a balanced diet, is what they kind of promote now. And that was my life growing up. That's what I ate. I would say that overall I was very healthy. I got sick occasionally, of course, just like everybody else, but it wasn't anything major. I'd get like the croup, or I'd get a cold or stomach bug or whatever a couple times a year, and that's it. Had some decent allergies. I had allergies. I would get hay fever sometimes. We had to put hay up in the top of the barn, and if I got really wrapped up in that hay and it got all over me, it'd be kind of a nightmare for me. But overall, not too bad. My allergies weren't too bad when I was a kid. And like I said, I ate fantastic. I never had really access to junk food. The most processed food we ever had in the house at any given time was like my mom would buy cookies or something occasionally. And then we'd have breakfast cereal occasionally. Things like Captain Crunch or Raisin Bran, Cheerios, things like that. Standard stuff for a kid. But overall, like I said, my diet was phenomenal. Transitioning out of that as a teenager, we moved away from the farm. I think when I was about 11 years old. So we moved out to the country, which we were already in the country, but we moved kind of deeper into the country, like more into the woods type setting. And I would say that my diet was still pretty good as a teenager. My mom still cooked for us 3 home-cooked meals every single day. We didn't have a lot of stuff. When I lived on the farm, we lived in an old farmhouse. It was drafty, wood floors, creaky old wood floors. I think the house was over 100 years old. We had a wood stove for heat. We had no air conditioning. It was just this old rickety old farmhouse. And then when we moved into the country, we actually built our house. My parents built it. We all contributed. We built it basically by hand. We did pretty much everything. Like I said, we didn't have a lot, but we had enough. Like, we had a very good childhood. My parents worked very hard. Blue collar jobs their whole lives. Provided everything we need for us. I think we were kind of the number one priority. They worked their butts off for us, and couldn't be more grateful for that. But transitioning out, like I said, as a teenager and getting into the forest life, my diet was still pretty healthy, but I would say it started to transition more into a little bit more processed food, just because I would get my own food, especially as I got older. Like in high school, I started buying my own food. I started eating like frozen burritos and Tyson chicken nuggets with the breading on there, and I was kind of concocting my own stuff. Overall, though, I would say it wasn't too bad. It was still probably about 70% home cooked meals. And then the other 30% was just, whatever I could grab. When I moved out and I went into college at like 18 or 19 years old, that's when things really went downhill for my diet. All right. So when I started college, it basically came down to me buying whatever the heck I could afford, which was not good. I remember me and my roommate, we would go to the Dollar Tree where everything's a dollar, and we bought hamburgers out of the freezer section in there. I don't remember how much they were. They had to be like 50 cents or maybe $1 a piece. And we would stock up on these hamburgers and this really, really cheap food. Like, I have no idea what was in it, but that's what we would eat. But like, if we went to Kroger or Walmart or something like that to get food, like that was living high up on hog right there. So we were literally eating like ramen noodles and sandwiches and stuff. That's what we were living on. And that went on for roughly about a year or so, because I think I moved out for about a year. And I was really skinny at the time. I mean, I was like 145 pounds. I would say that point in my life was probably the worst of my diet. It was probably the worst it ever got. So then as I moved out of there and I graduated college, I got a job in a career field I was very passionate about. It took me around the world like I was traveling, 50 to 75% of the year. But, I started out in this career in 2005, and right at the end of 2005, a very dear friend of mine introduced me to weight training. The moment I started that, man, I was hooked. I mean, loved it, because like I said, I was always a skinny kid. My max weight was 145 pounds. That was the heaviest I ever was. I had done some weight training prior to this. Like, I took strength and conditioning in my junior year of high school. I was the weakest person in that class. And by the end of that class, by the end of that semester, I still lifted less than every single person in that class, including the girls, all right? So when I say I was skinny, I was skinny. I was very small. I was very weak. So I think that's one of the reasons why I like weight training, because I was in there with these were some bigger dudes I was working out with, and it made me feel good. Like, I went in there at first and I was super embarrassed about it, because I'm trying to bench and I'm doing the bar and I'm all wobbly and stuff, and it just didn't feel natural. But I was like, you know what? Screw it. Like, everybody's got to start somewhere, and this is me start. So I'm just going to go through with it, and I'm going to push through, and I'm going to do it. Well, they started introducing me to supplements and things like that, and they started showing me like the right way to train. I got to the point where, I was training 2 times a day, 5 or 6 days a week. Not all the time, not year round, but there was periods where I was like, I'm trying to bulk up, put some muscle on. I'm gonna give this all I have. Usually when I commit to something, I'm pretty darn dedicated. I just go all in on it. So I did. It didn't take long. I started seeing some major gains. I went from about 145 to about 170. I think within the first year and a half, and then by the end of the 3rd year, I was at 200 pounds. My strength was way up. I looked fantastic. I felt fantastic. When I started weightlifting, I also started a very strict diet, like a bodybuilding diet to go along with that. The staple foods: chicken, rice, sweet potatoes, whole grains, broccoli, greens, pretty much all the healthy food they promote. And I was doing some supplements here and there. I was doing like whey protein, I do creatine, I do glutamine occasionally, some BCAAs, things like that. And I was doing fantastic. I really was. I put on a lot of weight, put on a lot of strength. I felt great. For about 11 years, I stuck with it. I went from 145 pounds to 230 was my heaviest. And I think I got to 230 in about 2016, 2017-ish time frame. And that's kind of where I stalled out at, was about 230. And, a year or so leading up to that, I got in powerlifting. And then when I started powerlifting, that's when the scale started to move again. So I went from 200 to 230. So I was eating a whole lot more food. I drastically increased my bulking cycle. I bumped that way up. I was eating a whole lot more carbs. It was probably more like 50 to 60% carbs at that time, and then protein and low fat. When I started powerlifting, my weights went back up. I actually ended up crossing the 1,200 pound mark on the big 3. So that's bench, squat, and deadlift. I was doing over 1,200 pounds on those 3. Felt pretty darn good. I was kind of bigger than I would like to be fat-wise. I had a little higher body fat percentage than I would have liked to have, but that comes with bulking. If you're going to bulk up, you have to expect to put on a little bit of fat. But overall, my diet was still very strict. I still ate staple foods. I would eat red meat maybe a couple times a week. I would eat a lot of fruit, a lot of vegetables, chicken, rice, tuna, all that good stuff. And then occasionally on the weekends, I would give myself cheat meals. Sometimes I'd do a whole weekend. Sometimes I'd do 1 or 2 days. Sometimes I'd, maybe every other week or so, I'd give myself a cheat meal or a cheat day. But overall, super strict. I was just eating a lot of food because I was hungry every 2 hours on the dot. It didn't matter. I was eating full meals too. Like, I would eat maybe 8-10 ounces of chicken breast a meal, along with some rice, along with sweet potatoes, along with like peas, carrots, asparagus, you name it. A full meal about 7 times a day, up to 9 times a day, and I was hungry. Every 2 hours I was shaking. I was lightheaded, and I was like, I gotta eat. I think a lot of that had to do with just how hard I was training, but also my metabolism had just adjusted to that. Probably the lack of nutrients and the carbohydrates and things like that. There was some blood sugar stuff going on there. But like I said, I was hungry, so I ate. So at the end of 2017, I was actually on a business trip because, like I said, I traveled for work quite a bit, 50 to 75% of the year. So I was overseas in South Korea. I went across the street to my favorite gym. I walked across the street, and I had noticed a couple days leading up to this, I'd go over there and weight train. Like one day I went over there and I was trying to deadlift, and usually I would warm up with 225, and that was super easy for me. So I'd throw 4 plates on there and just rep out like 15-20 reps, and that would be my warm up. I tried to do 225 a couple of days prior to this night, and my first 3 reps almost passed out. I got really lightheaded. I had to like kneel down and just kind of put my head between my knees, and I was like, okay, something's not right. Like, this has never happened before. Something is not going well here. So I took 2 plates off and had 135 on there, and again I tried to just do a few reps, and I got to like maybe 5 reps, and the same thing happened. I just got super lightheaded and I was almost passed out. I was like, okay, maybe deadlifting for me today is not going to happen, so I'm just going to go in here and do some back work. And I went in there to do some rows. Here I am, 230-pound bodybuilder. I'm going to go heavy starting out. So I grabbed the 100-pound dumbbells and I bend over to start doing rows. And as soon as I do like 5 or 6 reps, same thing happens. I get lightheaded and almost pass out. And at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm chalking it up. I'm wrapping it up for the day. I'm going to go rest, and then I'll try back again tomorrow. So I went back in there. It was like a day or 2 later. That's when everything kind of went downhill. So I went in there and I started working out, and I was doing I think chest and back. I knew that I had these problems like a couple days prior, so I wasn't going super crazy. I wasn't going super heavy, and I was on machines actually. I was like, okay, I'm just going to take it kind of easy and just do machines. And I went in there and I was doing chest press on the machine, and I was doing kind of lightweight. I think I did like 20 or so reps, and my heart rate was just, maxing out like I was running a marathon. It was beating so fast. I almost couldn't even feel the beats, the individual beats, because it was beating so fast. And I tried that about 3 times, and then I just became extremely lightheaded, and my heart was racing so fast I thought I was going to pass out. And when I realized what was actually going on, that's when I started freaking out a little bit, because I realized that my heart was beating pretty much at max capacity, like at max speed, and it was not slowing down. Like if I sat there and I rested, no matter what I did, it continued this rhythm. I continued to be very lightheaded and very weak, and I was like, okay, like something's probably pretty wrong here. So I kind of just left the gym. I got my stuff and I walked out, and my hotel was right across the street. So I just kind of walked across to the hotel, and before going in, I just paced around outside to try and get my heart rate to slow down, practice some breathing techniques, things like that. Long story short, it didn't slow down. It just kept beating, and the longer it beat like this, the stronger the beats got. So it wasn't long before my heart was just pounding. Not only was it beating really fast, but it felt like somebody was behind my rib cage just slugging the crap out of it. And I could actually look down at my shirt and watch it move in and out. I went up to my room, I sat down on the couch, and I started having panic attacks. And then, I had panic attacks a long time ago before this, so I knew what it was. I knew the techniques to calm myself down. So I tried those and nothing worked. Like I just continually started having panic attacks. They got to the point where I was like, dude, I'm going to fall over and pass out and probably die of a heart attack. Nobody's going to know I'm up here dead. So I actually ended up walking down to the lobby and ended up having to call an ambulance. And they came and picked me up, took me to a local hospital. They did all kinds of chest x-rays, EKGs. They took blood draws. They did a bunch of lab work and stuff like that. And basically came back is that, my heart had entered some sort of abnormal rhythm. By the time I got to the hospital, of course, it had stopped. It was back to normal. So they couldn't pick up a whole lot of crazy stuff that was going on with it. And the chest x-ray and all that stuff came back normal. So they were like, just take it easy for a couple days and go from there. I went back to the hotel. I got released later that night. I spent a long time in the hospital, but I did get released. So I went back to the hotel, rested up a couple days. I was still out there working, so I was still doing my work and stuff. But progressively, I was getting worse and worse and worse. I continued to have panic attacks, anxiety attacks, really bad anxiety for no reason. Just, for no reason. It didn't matter what I was doing. I just had really bad anxiety, brain fog. One of the weirdest things that started progressively getting worse, which is also something that I had prior to this, was every time after I would eat, my heart would actually stop for like 3 seconds. And I could feel it, and it freaked me out. Like I thought every single time I thought I was having a heart attack. So my heart would kind of flutter, and then it would stop beating for like 3 seconds. I would almost pass out because of the lack of blood flow to my brain. And then it would backflip is what it felt like in my chest, and it would start back up. That was horrible. And that happened every single time I ate. And then I started getting really bad heart palpitations constantly. This progressively got worse. I worked, I continued to work in Korea until my mission was done. So when I came home, obviously the plane ride back is pretty long. I think it was like 17 hours on one plane to fly back over. And my anxiety by that point had gotten so bad that I was literally freaking out just about everything. I couldn't imagine getting on a plane in the state I was in, torturing myself for 17 hours, not being able to get off. I figured like I will have a heart attack and die, especially the way my heart was acting up. So I ended up going to a local clinic out there. Thankfully, they prescribed me Xanax, and they said basically use these as needed to lower your anxiety. Like if you start having a panic attack, take one, it should knock it out. And thank God I did that, because as soon as we got to the airport, when we were coming home, I was standing in the security line and I started freaking out. I was sweating profusely. I was rocking back and forth, thought I was gonna pass out. I was extremely lightheaded, weak, my knees were shaking, my whole body was shaking. I'm sure I was pale as a ghost. I was like, you know what? I hate taking medication. I'm not a medication fan. But I was like, I'm gonna pop one of these Xanax and see what happens. And sure enough, within 15 minutes, like it baselined me. I was back to normal and felt pretty much fantastic, actually. I felt fine. So from there, I flew home. And then when I got home, my health basically spiraled out of control. It was all downhill. I mean, everything I was having when I was in Korea just got progressively worse in a very short time frame. My heart got worse pretty much every single day, 24 hours a day. It was beating like it was coming out of my chest. It would go through bouts of like very, very fast heartbeats. It would beat very irregularly. I would have heart palpitations all day, every day. It would just pound like I was running a marathon, even if I was sleeping. It got so bad, actually, I was terrified to lay in bed and go to sleep because my heart would beat so hard, that's all I could focus on. And it was tormenting, just absolutely tormenting. I ended up going to the doctor. I went to the hospital a couple times. I went to the doctor, hundreds of times probably. I ended up going to cardiologist. I was in specialist after specialist. I had abnormal liver enzymes. I had mineral deficiencies, magnesium, potassium were all out of whack. I had a bunch of weird stuff going on in my blood work. I had supraventricular tachycardia is what they diagnosed me with my heart, which is basically where your heart goes through bouts of irregular heartbeats, extremely fast irregular heartbeats. So it just beats at like 200 beats a minute, and they're very inefficient heartbeats, so it makes you real lightheaded, like you're going to pass out. I had heart palpitations all the time, high blood pressure for some reason, and my digestion and my overall health was an absolute nightmare. It got to the point where when I would eat food, it would come out pretty much the same way it came in. Like I was not digesting anything. I was not absorbing any food. I was bloated all the time. My stomach hurt. I started bleeding from back there, which is a pretty horrible thing to have. And I started losing massive amounts of weight. So I went from 230 back down to 145 in about 6 months. And again, what I gained over the years was a significant amount of muscle. So what I lost in weight was all the fat I had gained and about 70% of the muscle I gained. Probably more than that. Because like I said, I was down to 145, which I had not been since high school. What took me 10, 11, 12 years to gain in muscle, I lost in 6 months. Just like that. Blink of an eye. And that put me in a depressed state. I got very depressed. I was just disgusted with myself, I put in all this work. I'd come so far, and here I am just losing every bit of it in 6 months' time. Like, it's just so easy to lose it, It was so disheartening. And my health, like I said, just deteriorated. I developed thrush all the time. I started getting like fungal infections. I had jock itch real bad. Come to find out, I had candida overgrowth, like horrible candida overgrowth and like fungal infections. I started getting UTIs, urinary tract infections. It was a bad situation. I got sick all the time, and I was just chronically wasting away. And I had this heart thing going on top of all that. So, and then, there was a lot of other things which I'll have to make another video about, but there's a lot of other problems I started developing, like hormonal issues. I got vitiligo. I started, just so many things, joint pain, brain fog, anxiety, panic attacks, like all this stuff. And it just piled onto itself. It got to the point where it was just too much to deal with, like I was going to the cardiologist and they wanted to put me on blood pressure medication. They wanted to do an ablation on my heart, because my heart was beating in this erratic rhythm, and they said, well, the only option is basically like a pacemaker or an ablation. We can go in there and burn the nerves in your heart. And I'm sitting there like, dude, like 6 months ago I was fine. 6 months ago I felt like I was on top of the world. I was healthy, and it just transform like that, like seemingly overnight. So, my question to him was like, how could I have went from being completely normal and not having this problem to now having to have an ablation and a pacemaker overnight? Like, there has to be a root cause. But the problem with these doctors and stuff is nobody ever told me there was a root cause. Nobody ever looked at diet. As a matter of fact, it got to the point where I started looking into nutrition, and I was like, there has to be an underlying cause, and maybe nutrition is the reason. So I started looking into that, and I started doing my own research, and I was pulling up articles and things like that. I actually learned that magnesium deficiency can affect your heart rhythm, as well as potassium and sodium and all these things. So I took that to my cardiologist one day during my visit, and I said, hey, I found this out about magnesium. Do you think this might help? Like if I start eating magnesium-rich foods or get a supplement? And he basically looked at it. He picked up the papers, looked at it, and threw it back down. I'll never forget this. And he said, well, you can try it, but it's not going to work. It's not your problem. Food is not going to impact your heart this way. And I remember it crushed me, but at the same time, I was like, he has to be wrong. He has to be wrong, because I know I didn't have this before, and now I have this, and there has to be more to this story. So he has to be wrong. That was the thing that kept going through my mind. I went in and out of the doctors a few more times, and they were just bleeding me dry. My bank account's dry. They were bleeding my bank accounts dry. They were bleeding my mental capacity dry. I was just basically devastated at this point. I was in a bad state. We'll put it that way. I was in a really bad state. I stopped going. Like, they had put me on different medications and things like that. I was on antifungal medications, none of which helped because a lot of it was topical. They gave me nystatin, which was like a syrup, and come find out Candida actually loves sugar, and this was like 90% sugar they were giving me, and every time I would take it, it would make it worse. My Candida, my fungal infection flare-ups and things like that would get much worse. My thrush would get worse. So I just gave up. I was like, you know what? I'm probably going to die at this point. Like, I was 145 pounds. At any moment, I could probably have a heart attack. I'm probably going to die. Screw it. I'm coming off medication. I'm going to take matters into my own hands. And if I die, it's not going to be at the hands of these fools, So that was kind of the stance I took. And that's what I did. I stopped going, and I started just researching my whole day, every day. When I wasn't working, because I still worked through all this. But when I wasn't working, I was just researching, trying to figure out what the heck's going on with me. I started making some discoveries. I found out that diet plays a huge role in all this gut stuff I was going through, and all these candida and fungal infections and UTIs, and then I started learning more about mineral deficiencies and heart regulation and hormones, and it just all kind of started stacking upon each other, and it started making a lot more sense. So I started playing with diet, going through all this without medication, without any kind of intervention. It was hard. It was tough. I would literally wake up in the morning before going to work, and the first thing I would do is sit on the couch. It's no joke. Okay, I'm not exaggerating. I would sit on the couch. I would open my phone up, and I would dial 911 and have my thumb hovering over the call button, deciding whether or not I was going to call an ambulance, because my heart was just beating so irregularly. I mean, at any moment, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. And this went on for months, okay? The better part of a year. And it was hell. It actually was. It was horrible. The thought of just, that you pretty much imagine yourself having a heart attack every single moment of every day. And I got to where I was compulsively checking my pulse, like around the clock, because it would beat fast, it would beat slow, and then it would stop beating, and then it was always beating so hard too. Like, no matter what I did, if I was sitting down, it was just beating so hard, like I was running a marathon. And that was tough. But like I said, all this research and stuff I did, it started giving me hope. I started getting hope that I'm like, I can potentially cure myself. Maybe I can make this happen. Maybe I can overcome this. So I started playing with diet. And the first few diets I tried, I started out with vegan, actually. So I did that for a couple months. And I did see some improvements in candida, for sure, and the fungal infection. But when I started doing vegan, I was also doing cleanses and things like that. I started looking into like candida cleanses, supplements to take to get rid of candida. So I think a combination of the vegan diet and the candida cleanses definitely improved that aspect. Didn't make it go away, but I did. That was the first time I started seeing improvements in those areas. But overall, in the end, I got so thin on the vegan diet. Like, I was below 145, I was probably about 140. I didn't even take pictures of myself back then. I was so disgusted with myself. And everybody was very concerned for my health. They were like, dude, you need to start eating, because Everybody thought I was dying, which I was. I mean, I was dying. I was wasting away and I was dying. And the worst thing that happened with the vegan diet is I started having really bad blood sugar spikes and falls. And I was doing vegan right. I was not eating anything processed. It was almost a raw vegan diet, but I was eating some cooked beans and things like that to get my protein up because I was losing so much weight. But at the end of the day, I wasn't absorbing hardly any nutrients. You know, my nails got really brittle. My hair got kind of thin looking. My face was all sunk in. My teeth weren't doing too well. I constantly had bloating. My stomach was a wreck. I was still bleeding from back there every day. Every single day I was bleeding. And that was kind of scary. But it just didn't work. Like, I was constantly hungry. It didn't matter how much I eat. I literally had this huge bowl that I would just fill up full of salad and fruit and things like that. It had to be two pounds of vegetables in a sitting, and I would just power that down, and I'd be hungry an hour later. You know what I mean? At 145 pounds or 140 pounds, I'd be hungry an hour later after eating like 2 pounds of food. So I ended up switching from that to fruitarian, and that was worse. So when I went to fruitarian, I was doing like Freely the Banana Girl. You know, I'd buy like a cart full of bananas and oranges and grapefruits, and I mean, you name it. I was buying all kinds of stuff. I was buying the healthiest fruits I could think of, the healthiest fruits I could buy, all organic stuff. And I would eat raw fruit. I would eat these massive bowls of fruit. And I remember driving to work one day and I had 5 bananas. That was going to be my breakfast. And I got down to 3 bananas, or I got 3 bananas down, and I almost passed out. Like, I got so lightheaded, I almost passed out. And even though I was eating these bananas, I was like ravagingly hungry, starving, okay, like dire need of food. And I remember, like, I almost pulled over because I'm like, dude, if I keep driving, like, I'm gonna wreck or kill somebody or kill myself. So I ended up kind of slowing down. I pulled off a little bit, and then I was kind of came to, and I went on into work. And I ended up eating those other 2 bananas. At lunchtime, I actually had to go out and get a blood sugar testing kit because I was so hungry and I was so lightheaded, and like, it felt like my blood sugar was like 0. I mean, that's how low it felt. It felt like I was just like binging, and my blood sugar just crashed. I was shaking. I would eat, and then 30 minutes later, I was hungry. Not just hungry, but starving hungry. Like, I have to eat like right now. So I remember I went out and I got this blood sugar kit, and I don't like needles, but I ended up sticking my finger and I took my blood sugar. I don't remember what it was. It was pretty high. But then I started testing my fasting blood glucose, and it was consistently above 100, usually about 110, 115. I think it was maybe 120 a couple times. And at that point, I was like, you know what? Fruitarian, this fruit diet is not doing it for me. Like, I'm basically pre-diabetic at this point. I've got to try something else. So from there, I went to keto. And then keto, I saw the most amount of relief. When I started keto was around the time I started doing like magnesium supplementation. Because when I was doing vegan and fruitarian, I was eating like magnesium rich foods. And I did see some relief in my heart, but it wasn't anything substantial. It was just like not as many heart palpitations, not as many runs of supraventricular tachycardia. Like, I actually ended up wearing like a week-long Holter monitor for a while, and they would monitor my heart, and I'd press the button, you know, when it was freaking out, which was all the time. So they were able to get a lot of good readings to figure out what was going on there. And yeah, it was less profound on those 2 diets, but when I went keto and I started supplementing with magnesiums, when it started actually getting a lot better. So I actually ordered some magnesium supplements off of Amazon. I think the recommended dosage was like 2 pills. So I was like, I don't know what this is going to do to me. I'm going to take 1. So I remember taking 1, and like I said, I was keto at the time. So I was doing a little bit better. My digestion was a little bit better. I'd started to gain a little bit of weight back. I think maybe like 5 or 10 pounds I'd gained. It wasn't much though, but my digestion was still wrecked. I was still bleeding all the time. I was extremely constipated. That's the other thing with like vegan and fruitarian. I got very constipated to the point to where I ended up developing hemorrhoids on top of everything else. So that was fun as well. But anyway, back to the magnesium. So I took the magnesium, and when I took the 1 pill, within 15 minutes, my heart streamlined. Like, I almost cried. I literally almost cried. That was the first time in almost a whole year that I saw a lot of relief from my heart, which was one of my main concerns. Well, it was my main concern, because I was like, any moment I'm going to have a heart attack and die, which is very possible. I mean, I definitely could have, the way it was beating. And if it would have continued, I probably would have eventually. But the moment I took that magnesium pill, and that happened, I knew. I was like, this is the trick. This is what's going to fix my heart right here. It's the deficiency is the problem. I'm going to get this resolved. Long story short on that didn't last long. 2 weeks, and my gut was so destroyed. I had leaky gut. what ended up happening is the oral magnesium supplementation was absorbing into my bloodstream at a very high rate. So when I would take these pills, it almost killed me, actually. I took one pill one day and my blood pressure got really low. I'm talking, I don't know what it was, but it was like so low that I literally watched the veins on my hand collapse. And I'm a very vascular person by nature, so they're usually very full. My veins are usually very full, and they just kind of collapsed. And when that happened, I almost passed out. And that lasted for like an hour before I was able to regain basically my consciousness and come to. And I had to like flush my system, drink a ton of water, and flush all this stuff out. So then I ended up cracking the capsules open and dumping a little bit in my water, and I was just testing it out. And I would just drink a little bit of water with the magnesium in there. Immediately, my anxiety would shoot through the roof and my blood pressure would drop and I would almost pass out. So I was like, okay, this was helping. Now it's killing me. So I had to stop that. All right. So again, not a good situation. So this went on for a while. I was keto for a few months, several months. I think I started keto like October or November of 2018. I don't remember what I ended up doing with magnesium from there. I think I just went back to more magnesium-rich foods. You know, I was kind of following a Dr. Berg version of keto where you eat like 10 cups of vegetables per day, which is why I was so stopped up. Vegetables just did not work for me. They did not digest. They were blocking a bunch of nutrient absorption, and I was just basically pooping it all back out. And, you know, again, I was very weak. I was still very frail. I still didn't feel very, very good, but I saw some improvements. So fast forward to April 2019, I'm on another business trip. I was in California this time. I woke up one morning just extremely bloated. I was bloated, my stomach hurt, I was bleeding back there again, and I was like, you know what, something's got to give. And I knew that the one thing I could eat and did not have any problems with was meat, because I had eaten like just plain meat before, and I was like, man, I feel pretty decent like eating this way. And it just kind of clicked with me one day. I was like, I've got to make a change, and this is going to be the change. And, you know, leading up to this, I'd heard about the carnivore diet just through my research and things like that. Dr. Baker had actually popped up. I mean, my first thought, obviously, just like everybody else, was like, this dude's a freaking lunatic. It's a shortcut to an early grave. He's just going to kill himself, give himself a heart attack. You can't live without vegetables. You can't live without all the nutrients and stuff that are in vegetables. This is freaking ridiculous. Exactly what I thought. And I wrote it off. But in this moment of desperation, it clicked with me. I thought back on that, and I was like, you know, there's people saying that, specifically Sean Baker, because he's the only one that I ever saw really talking about it. There's people saying that, yeah, this works to cure illnesses. And I knew that I could eat meat and it didn't affect my digestion, so I'm gonna try it out. So I went out that night and I bought like a week's worth of steaks. I went to Whole Foods, stocked the fridge up at my hotel, and I started eating steaks. I ate steaks for a week, every single meal. This is gonna sound crazy, but the first 24 to 48 hours when I did this, I felt substantially better. I mean, substantially better. Quite a bit better than I had felt in quite a while, actually. So I was like, okay, I'm definitely going to continue this the full week. And by the end of that week, I felt better than I had felt in probably about a year, to be honest. I mean, I felt pretty freaking good. My energy was back. I was sleeping good at night. My digestion was flawless. Like, I would eat, and I think by that point, I'd already cleared out all the plants and things that were in me. So I would eat, and there was no bloating. There was no discomfort. I felt good. Like, my brain felt clear. My mind felt clear. I felt good. So I just continued on. So I went another month, and I noticed by the end of that month, I felt better. I went a couple more months, and by that time, I felt even better. And then before you know it, I'm at a year. And by the end of that year, it's no joke, I had reversed pretty much every single chronic issue I'd been dealing with. I had reversed my candida was gone. My fungal infections had cleared up. I wasn't getting like sinus infections anymore, which is something I used to get all the time. My allergies cleared up. I had really bad histamine responses prior to this, and food allergies. All that seemed to go away. It took me roughly a year, probably a little over a year, to clear up the bleeding, the ulcerative colitis, things like that, the small bacterial intestinal overgrowth, SIBO, all that crazy stuff going on in there, the candida, all that. It took about that whole year for all that to get eradicated. And I didn't stop bleeding from back there for about a year, which was pretty horrible. But it took a lot of gut healing. And I'll definitely go into that a lot more in another video. From then on, I just continued. I saw more and more improvements. The longer I went 2 years, I went 3 years, and now I'm at 5 years. And I have not noticed one single negative side effect from this whatsoever. And I've been strict carnivore, aside from experimenting on myself, because I do experiment on myself from time to time just to see how I respond to certain things, how I react. But that's not really eating for nutrition. That's just eating to see what a food does to my body. But aside from that, I've been strict carnivore, basically meat, salt, and water for 5 years straight. And I have noticed nothing but profound benefits. Nothing. I mean, no negative side effects whatsoever. I don't have... I mean, it's going to sound crazy, and I might be biased by now, but I don't have anything bad to say about it. There is nothing that I've experienced that hasn't been phenomenal. I owe my life to this diet, and that is a fact. If I would have continued the path I was on and not found carnivore and not found the healing power of meat, and if I wouldn't have landed on this lifestyle, I have no doubt in my mind that I would probably not be here today, because the trajectory I was on, where I basically lost, half or a third of my body weight in 6 months' time. I was continually wasting away, and my heart in the shape it was in my depressed state. I mean, it's kind of hard to talk about, but there were times where I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? What's the better alternative? Me going through all this and having this happen to me and just suffering every single day, like torturing myself every single day, or just rolling over and giving up and dying. I would never consider taking my own life, but the fact that those thoughts crossed my mind and I was so depressed that I was like, maybe it's just better to die so I don't have to suffer through this. It's a pretty profound moment in your life where it really makes you think about what's really important. And to me now, I know my health is the most important thing I have. It's the most important thing we all have. And, I think back then, even though I think I was doing the right things, I was eating the foods we were told is healthy. I was eating these bodybuilding diets, and I was exercising all the time. And by definition, I should have been one of the most healthy people on the planet. But knowing what I know now about food has completely changed my perspective on that. Even though it was quote unquote healthy food, I've come to realize there's a lot of things in food that we don't think about. There's a lot of things in food, and I'm not even talking about like plant toxins and things like that. I'm talking about what's in food from manufacturing and just from how it's produced and raised, that I think is a big driver in our current health crisis. I mean, I really do. I think that's what's driving a lot of this, and I think that's what wrecked my health. And like I said, if I had not landed on this lifestyle, if I had not found this, if I had not watched that Sean Baker video where he was talking about meat, and if I didn't know it was a thing, maybe I would have still ate meat knowing that, I felt pretty decent eating it. But the fact that he was on there kind of standing up for it when nobody else was and putting it out there for people. I found it, and like I said, meat saved my life. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. Because my magnesium deficiency was so bad, it took me a year to fully overcome that. And I'll make a full video on how I did that, because that's a full process as well. It's going to take a full video. But had my magnesium deficiency progressed further, because it was already so bad. I mean, it was so bad I had a diagnosed irregular heartbeat that was basically life-threatening at that point. And it was only getting worse. And had I done the ablation, or had I have went on or done a pacemaker, it basically would have been covering up and putting a Band-Aid on the root cause. And it wouldn't have done anything to fix it, actually. And that probably would have been one of my worst life decisions had I went through with that. Thank goodness I didn't. Over the years, I've come to realize that we're sold a bill of lies when it comes to a lot of stuff about health and nutrition. There's a lot of stuff that's very misleading. It's very confusing as well. There's so much information out there. I mean, it can be absolutely horrible to try to wade through all the information. But I think it's that way by design. And it's not by design as in they've created this atmosphere of misinformation and confusion. I think it's that way because our health is in such a dire state right now that nobody knows which way is up, and everybody's grasping at straws, because you've got this governing body, the ones that are supposed to be looking out for our health, telling us here's what you need to eat to be healthy, and it's not that. And I think that's hard for a lot of people to grasp. It was hard for me to grasp. I mean, I grew up eating 3 balanced meals a day. I never would have thought in a million years eating meat only would be something that's sustainable or healthy. And here I am. I'm living proof that is a possibility, and it's definitely a thing. And it has profound impacts on your health. Nutrition in general has profound impacts on your health. I think just the fact that we're told all these things about food, yet here we are. Like, here's what you need to eat healthy, and people try to do that and they're still unhealthy. So it's like, where do you go from there? And I think that's where the confusion stems from. You know, over the years, I've grown to not trust anything. I don't trust anything I'm told. I don't trust anything I read. I don't trust doctors, hospitals. I mean, I've lost trust in a lot of stuff. So the way I view things now, I basically take everything with a grain of salt. I'll read something, I'll hear what somebody has to say, and I'll look into it. And I experiment on myself to see how things work for me as an individual, because I think we're all very individualized. I don't think there's any one size fits all when it comes to diet and nutrition. I'm a 5-year carnivore. I've adopted my dog with the same diet. Obviously, I think dogs are carnivores as well. They are carnivores. So my dog eats the same way I do. And it's something I believe in very strongly. But I don't think it's for everybody. I think it's a very good tool. And it's probably a tool that anybody going through a tough situation with their health, anybody having health problems, it's something I would recommend to anybody to try for 60 to 90 days as an elimination diet, to reset yourself, to heal yourself, and then to experiment with foods to see how foods affect you, and then essentially build a diet that you can sustain for the rest of your life. If carnivore ends up being that thing, that's awesome. You know, it was that thing for me. And I've experimented with other foods and definitely other diets, so I know how these things affect me. And I know that for me, eating meat only is what makes me feel the best. It's what makes me perform the best. I'm back into lifting weights again. I'm performing at a higher level than I ever had before. Everything about me is better. And I'm going on 40 years old. I'll be 40 this year. So it's changed my life in a whole lot of different ways. I mean, that's what led me to developing Apex Pack and Tribe. The profound benefits it had on me. And then when I transitioned my dog to the diet and I saw the profound benefits it had on her, and I realized what I was feeding her when I was giving her kibble, which is basically the same thing we eat on a daily basis. I mean, and that's kind of how Apex came to be, is that I realized that there are a whole lot of similarities with dog foods as there are with human foods. It's the same ingredients. I mean, it honestly is. It's the same products in the foods, the same artificial ingredients. It's the same actual like produce, the types of food that's in the food, or that's in the dog food, and it's in the processed food. And essentially anything that comes from industrial food or commercial food is essentially toxic. I mean, there's so many things in there that are absolutely destroying our health that I don't think a lot of people realize. And when I started learning all this stuff about dog food and human food, and how dogs basically have the same rates of cancer and diabetes and obesity and skin conditions and all these same illnesses that humans have now at the same rates. I mean, almost tracking along almost exactly with humans. And the one commonality that's consistent between the two species is the food we consume. I'm not saying that we eat kibble, and that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that the things that are in the food are the same things that are in the dog food. And the same things that are in the dog food are the same things that are in human food. It's all the same stuff. It comes from the same plants, whether it be rice, carrots, peas, wheat, corn, all this stuff. It's all come from the same place. It has the same chemicals used on it, and it's fortified with the same synthetic vitamins and minerals, and it has the same ingredients, it has the same additives and preservatives. It's all the same. So to me, it's no coincidence that dogs are faring the same as humans when it comes to health. And that's why Apex Pack and Tribe was founded. It was founded for people in search of a better way. And I feel like a carnivore diet, whether it be short-term or long-term, is that way for optimal health. Even if it's just using it as an elimination diet so you can determine the foods that work well for you and the ones that don't. I mean, that's an awesome thing too. And you know, if you choose to use it for an elimination diet just for a period of time and you find out it's not for you, at least by the end of that period of time, you're going to know what foods actually make you feel optimal. And you can carry that with you for the rest of your life. That's something that's going to empower you, and you're going to know more about yourself by the end of that time period than you knew before going in. And I think that's true with any diet. I would encourage anybody to try every diet. Like, I feel like me trying all these different diets, vegan, fruitarian, keto, and all that, give me a pretty unique perspective, because now I can truly say that I know for sure what works best for me and what doesn't. I don't have to guess. I don't have to guess what foods make me feel good and what don't. I don't have to rely on what somebody else tells me is best for me. You know, you got all these influencers and these nutritionalists and these scientists and all these people out there saying that this food's best, that food's best. Maybe not for me though, because I've done the experimentation on myself and I know what's best for me. I think that's extremely empowering. If you can Know what works best for you, and you can carry that with you for the rest of your life. And you'll know exactly what you can and can't eat, or what you should and shouldn't be eating. And you'll know the risks if you do eat something you shouldn't eat. My number one mission is just to share my experiences. I just want to share what I've learned over the years, and hopefully uncover some of the lies we've been told, and just help people that might be going through some of the darkest, but possibly most rewarding and impactful moments of their life. Because I know what I went through, while it was horrible, and you know, every day it was a struggle, and it was awful. I wouldn't trade it for the world, because it led me here. It led me to this community. It led me to this lifestyle. And had I not found this, I don't know where I'd be. As bad as it was, I wouldn't trade it for the world. And that's what I hope to gain out of this, is just to help people, you know, because I feel like there's so many sick people out there right now. There's so many people that have sick dogs. Their dogs are going through the same things that we go through. And I think they're kind of forgotten a lot of times. You know, we improve our health, but maybe we won't think about our dogs. Or we improve our dog's health, but maybe we won't think about ourselves. So to just kind of tie those things together and see how they're all closely related, and just spread information, spread knowledge, spread what I know in hopes to help somebody else. And that's what this channel is all about. That's what Apex is all about. Just building a tribe of like-minded people to just share our experience. So that's my story. It's kind of a long one. Sorry if it was a little bit too long, but I'm going to talk about a lot of the stuff that I talked about in this video. Break down more in detail what I did for clearing out candida, fungal infections, the magnesium deficiency, the heart issues, all the things I was going through. There's a laundry list of things that I can go more in depth on. So I'll basically just put together some step-by-steps and just put the information out there, like, hey, here's what I did to overcome this. And I truly hope that helps someone out there. If I can help just one person, then my mission is complete. Then this channel is gonna fulfill its mission. So that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm doing. Just kind of putting it all out there. All right, I'm gonna wrap it up here. Like I said, expect some more videos from me. I don't know what topic I'll be covering next. I'm probably just gonna go down the list, whatever feels good at the time, and that's what I'll jump into. So for anybody that stuck with me this whole time, I appreciate it. So if you're looking forward to hearing more about how I overcame these crazy illnesses and these chronic conditions, and you want to hear more about canine health and human health and the proper human diet and just the healing power of meat, I'm going to be covering all those things. So go ahead and drop this video a like if it resonated with you, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, peace out.